Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
There's another neat feature, which is you can tell it to automatically appear and disappear. So one setting is you can tell it to automatically appear only when you're moving a slider. So you'll look at the picture and you move the slider and the histogram appears automatically. And as soon as you let go, it vanishes, right? And there's also the inverse. You can say, show me the histogram, but when I grab a slider, hide it, because you want to see the whole picture, right? So it lets you have the histogram available to you, but only exactly when you want it. And that's important on a small screen where every single, square inch matters.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. This is a fun one with Nik from Gentleman Coders. Gentleman Coders was founded in 2016 by Nik, an 18-year-old veteran of Apple. His roles in the Photos app group included Senior Director of Engineering and Chief Technical Officer. He also led the raw camera and core image teams, as well as the imaging team for the Mac version of Photos. He holds 55 patents in a wide range of disciplines, including image processing, audio processing, geotagging, wireless networking, and user interface design. It was a fascinating discussion, including some of his learnings from his time working on Aperture and Photos within Apple, and diving deep into his own app, Raw Power, which is incredible on the iPad and does take advantage of the unique platform that is the iPad, and is one of the only tools on iPadOS that lets you edit RAW files from cameras that aren't supported by Apple. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. Even $1 a month goes a long way in helping support the production of this show, and your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. Without further delay, here's my discussion with Nik, all about Raw Power. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Nik.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So I have been into photography kick ever since getting the 14 Pro Max, having a new kid for the first time, where we take thousands of photos, and also getting a Sony mirrorless camera. So I'm really taking a lot of photos these days and learning the ins and outs of RAWs and editing those. And you are the perfect person to talk to, as you are the creator of Raw Power.
Great.
So first, can you just introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and kind of the iPad? What role does that have?
Sure. So I spent a long time at Apple in a variety of roles. In terms of photography, I was in charge of of Aperture and iPhoto, and then later on the imaging part of the Photos application, some of the underlying frameworks like the core image, the raw camera features were all things that were part of my organization. And so I spent about 10 years in photography and then left Apple and started the Raw Power app. In terms of iPad, the iPad is probably the device, including the Mac, that I use the most. I actually spend most of my time actually on the Mac when I'm not developing software.
Yeah.
So I use it for kind of everything, especially now that, you got iPad Pros with mice and keyboards. It's kind of my main thing when I'm not actually sitting there, pounding away at the keyboard to write code.
Yeah, I imagine Swift Playgrounds could not support Raw Power at this point.
No, there are definitely limitations, so it's kind of a split world between the Mac and the iPad. But I think it's important to choose the best tool for what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And the iPad is fantastic for lots of things, but high-end image processing application development's not one of them.
Right. Yeah. And that background's super cool, coming from Apple and dealing with their photography apps. And you were kind of spearheading like the direction of feature sets, and like, was UI a part of that, or what kind of aspects?
Yeah. Everything. So I was a senior director there, so I was in charge of the whole organization for engineering. So it was specifying features, user interface, the underlying architecture, and I also created a number of the features that are in the product as well, at least Aperture and iPhoto. So it was really both of those things. And so it was really great to be part of all of those different pieces.
Yeah.
Because you get a really good insight into the stack from the top to the bottom.
For sure. And as far as photography itself, what's your interest into that? Was it one of those things at Apple you're like, we're working on these different apps and you kind of volunteered and then got into photography as a result of building these apps, or was it a passion before that?
A little bit of both. So my dad was really into photography, and so he always had a camera with him, and he was always shooting. It was a Minolta, mostly. He shot Minolta. And then I was shooting a lot in college.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took a break from that. But then, kind of like you, I have kids. When the kids came along, then it's like, okay, let's we're taking a lot more pictures and videos and that kind of thing. So I was starting to get more and more into that. The opportunity for Aperture came up where that group needed help, and so I transitioned over there to help them get it out the door. And so that was my exposure at that point to RAW and more advanced imaging. So I was more taking pictures, just a regular person before moving into much higher end photography and printing and that kind of thing. And I, caught the bug at that point, and I've really been into it ever since then.
Gotcha. Pretty cool.
And one nice thing about being at Apple is you get to play with a lot of cameras.
Yeah.
So I've gotten to play with just a crazy range of cameras. So that was really great. You learn a lot, and you also get to really appreciate the different the different approaches each manufacturer has. So
yeah,
that's where now.
And something your app fills a niche of is many cameras aren't supported by iOS or macOS, including the camera that I just got, the Sony EVZ10. You probably have insights as to how they decide or how they go about adding support. But I'm curious as to kind of what the process was for you in deciding this is the route I want to go and building, I think, kind of the only app that does this outside of Lightroom on iOS, of supporting all these weird, not weird, but all these very unique cameras that all have their own little file formats, that all have their own little tweaks about them. So it kind of walking through the process of why raw power.
Sure. So yeah, there's really a couple of different things there. So let's start with the camera support. So you're right. So Apple has historically supported a lot of cameras, hundreds and hundreds of cameras. And there's a complex process for supporting a camera, calibration, taking lots of shots. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes through that's involved in supporting a new camera. And recently, the rate at which they have been supporting cameras has dropped noticeably.
Yeah.
And so, we can speculate as to why, but in reality, it doesn't matter.
Right.
No. So what I noticed was I'm getting more and more emails from people asking for, this camera or that camera. And these are not niche cameras. I mean, Apple, doesn't support the Sony A7 IV, for example. Yeah. I mean, that is not a niche camera. So there's that kind of thing. And it's not just new cameras. There's formats that also Apple's never supported. So one of them is Fujifilm has a compressed format, and that is the kind of the default way people shoot, but Apple's decoder doesn't support compressed Fuji at all, of any camera, no matter what. And so that's a real problem for people, because if you've already shot it as compressed, short of converting it, you're kind of stuck. Yeah. So I felt that it was really important to, try to help these people out, because they want to use iCloud, they want to use photos, but their camera is not supported. One of the things that I think is not maybe well understood is why these cameras aren't just automatically supported.
Right.
I think people, I get these, again, I get people asking me about this, because one would think, sort of rationally, that if, let's say, Sony or Fuji would go and send Apple a document that says, this is our format, and here's how to decode it. But they don't do that. And so camera companies have historically kept their formats completely private. It's their secret. They don't tell you anything about them. And so all of these companies that have to write decoders have to reverse engineer the formats.
That is bonkers to me, because they're selling these cameras and the companies themselves, like, I don't think Sony has a comprehensive editing suite. Correct me if I'm wrong, or do they? Like, they're not selling software.
They might.
Yeah, like, these companies aren't selling software. Their business is the hardware, I would think.
You'd think that. And I mean, Nikon, they have their Nikon applications. It's complicated. I don't want to really speak for them, but I do know that they consider their RAWs to be, part of their secret sauce, we'll call it. And so it's not something that they document. They don't provide that information. There's a new camera. It's a Panasonic, I think the GH6. And they've changed the format of it in terms of the files. And so it's instead of the GH5, it's very different. And so, it's like, well, this is going to be a gigantic effort to now go and support this file. And they're not telling anybody how it works. So we're all kind of stuck. I know it sounds, as you said, it sounds bonkers, and it is.
It's like encouraging people to shoot in JPEG on these nice cameras and lose the quality.
And I mean, in fact, sometimes the manufacturers encrypt the information in the files. I am not making that up. That has really happened sometimes. So it's a large effort to support a new camera, and Apple's got its priorities. It's got its list of what it's going to do. But that doesn't always mesh with somebody who gets a camera, for Christmas or a birthday or something. And they're like, what do I do now? So that was one of the big priorities for Raw Power, was to add that support for cameras so that people could use them. And so Raw Power works kind of two ways. There's the part that integrates with the photo library, and the part, three ways. There's a photo extension. And then there's something that lets you just work with files, whether it's the Files app on iOS or the Finder. And so for the important thing for the RAW support was that it shouldn't matter how you store your images. So even if you have a RAW in Photos and you cannot see the image or edit it in Photos, Raw Power can read it in the photo library, give you a thumbnail, give you the metadata, and let you edit it. So all of those things are actually implemented in Raw Power. So you can even use you can put those RAWs into the photo library and work with them in Raw Power, because Raw Power provides its own alternative interface to your library. So Photos looks at the photo library, and Raw Power looks at the same photo library. It works with it, it reads and writes it, but it gives you a lot more features.
The extension within Photos, is that purely for editing within the Photos app of formats that iOS and iPadOS support, or does that extension somehow enable you to work with those RAWs within the Photos app?
So the photo extension, just to be clear, the photo extension actually only runs on Mac. It's not on iOS.
Okay, gotcha.
But it can read the RAWs that Photos cannot read.
Oh,
so it actually even does that too. Yeah. And actually the reason why there's no photo extension on the iOS is kind of funny. Apple's does not. So on Mac, if you have a RAW in the photo library and you open a photo extension for editing, you get the RAW. The extension gets the RAW.
Yeah.
On iOS, they do not give the RAW to extensions ever. And I've had this conversation with them multiple times that we need to start doing this. So the extension is not there because an extension called Raw Power that never got the RAW seemed like asking for
very
confused
much so,
people. So it's not there, and that's because iOS doesn't provide that information. It's just one of those things. So I keep hoping with M1 iPads, can we have the RAW now? That would be great.
Yeah.
So hopefully one day.
Yeah. So when a new camera comes out, do you get sample images somewhere from these cameras to test against, or what's your process for actually going in and adding support for new cameras?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, the way, so I don't, of course, have all these cameras
That'd be
myself,
very expensive.
so that would be
to do.
very expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, when Hasselblad comes out with a new camera, boy, that just kills me.
Yes.
So what I do is it's a combination of things. I will look for files that are just posted out there. I often will actually contact customers. So a customer will ask me, "Oh, do you don't support camera X," which they of course have,
Right.
and so I will ask them for a set of images. That's a very specific set of images, so that then I can use that to analyze and then produce what I need to do to support the file. So it's a multi-step process to get that camera support out, which gives you so it feels like it was supported by Apple. You get all the same features, all the same editing. There's very little, if anything, that's lost in the process of my extended support versus what Apple provides because of that process.
So in the Photos app, if you import a RAW that's unsupported, it's just kind of like a gray thumbnail, right? After you edit a photo with raw power, does that thumbnail, does that then magically get sent over to Photos using some kind of JPEG compound file, or how does that all work?
Yeah, so the way it works is when you edit an image, then two things get stored into the photo library. The first thing gets stored is a full-size JPEG that represents all the images. So it's basically, take all the edits and render a JPEG, and then that gets passed to Photos.
Okay.
And so it uses that, and it makes thumbnails and stuff out of that. Mm-hmm. So now you're seeing the image as it was edited. But the other really important thing that gets stored in there is the information about the adjustments. All of the data about the adjustments as actual data, not as pixels, but as instructions, right? You moved exposure by this, and you did levels here or curves or whatever. That all gets also stored into the database. And because that's stored in the database, that means that actually you have full non-destructive editing. So you can come back the next week or the next year, open up that image, and you have all the sliders in the right spot, and you can continue editing. Also, that works across iCloud. So if you have edited the image on your iPad, you can then go, and you're using iCloud Photos, you can go to your iPhone and open up raw power and see, again, all the sliders are on the right place and keep going. And you can even go to your Mac and continue editing there. And then it goes back to the iPad, the iPhone. All of those things all synchronize with full non-destructive editing through iCloud Photos. It's really amazing how well that works through the photo library.
Very cool. And something I did experience is I'll have a RAW that I edited in, say, Pixelmator Photo. I bounce in the raw power, and I try to edit that to photo, and it needs me to revert to the original. Is that a limitation of raw file formats, or what's going on there?
Okay, so what's happening there is, so I mentioned how the photo library lets an app or an extension store its adjustment information into the database, but it only lets one application store that. And further, it doesn't. So you kind of have to look at it as a series of almost like layers, sort of like a Photoshop layer kind of thing. So you got your original RAW. The first application will edit it. Let's say it's Pixelmator.
Yeah.
Pixelmator edits the photo. What has it got to do? It's got to store a JPEG into the library along with instructions. So now if you go to the next editor, like Raw Power, what's it going to work with? Well, if it works with the RAW, you're not going to see the Pixelmator and stuff, and it has no way of rendering Pixelmator's instructions.
The instruction set's different. LUTs are universal, but like each app has its own specialized instruction set. Like you pass LUTs from one app to another, but once you start, right? Well,
yeah. What's happening there is, so when an app, let's say Pixelmator or Raw Power, uses a LUT, there's no standard format for describing how an image is edited.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's, something like a text file or format,
Yeah.
HTML, some equivalent of that everybody follows. And you say, oh, okay, I understand that Pixelmator applied a LUT and they did this exposure and this and that, and now I can read this and process it. That's not how it works. Every application has its own way of storing the information, and they have their own algorithms. So nobody has everybody else's algorithms, and they don't know how to read the data. So when the second editor sees what the first editor did, it's like, I don't know. So it just takes the JPEG and keeps working on it.
Gotcha.
Same in the reverse. If you started with raw power and you edit raw power, then Pixelmator is just going to get a JPEG because it can't read the raw power data any more than raw power can read the Pixelmator data.
Gotcha.
So it's just kind of one of those things. And even if they could read the data, they don't have the same image processing.
It interpreted it differently, so it actually looked different. Probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if raw power has its own set of adjustments, like it has there's a deepen and lighten slider, or it's got its sharpener. Well, that is not available to Pixelmator, and Pixelmator's filters are not available to raw power. So there's no way for the apps to really share that, and that's unfortunate, but that's kind of how it's always been.
Right, yeah. Makes sense. JPEGs and RAWs. I've seen where Halide will, in big cameras too, will capture both a RAW and a JPEG simultaneously. It makes these compound files. And you mentioned like there's a JPEG written when you edit to the photos library as like a preview. What's the? Can you kind of walk me through these compound files versus the thumbnails and how that all works and kind of the workflow for dealing with these two different versions?
So it's not a compound file; it's two separate files.
Okay.
So there's
they're like linked together.
Nothing is simple, right?
Yeah.
So in a RAW. Okay, so let's take a JPEG to separate. So a JPEG will have stored inside of it like maybe a little thumbnail, for example. And a RAW will have a RAW, and then it will have one or two additional thumbnails stored within it. Sometimes it's a small one, an EXIF thumbnail, and then a larger one, which may be full size or maybe a little bit smaller. So there's the RAW. The RAW has itself a JPEG, and then if you shoot RAW plus JPEG or RAW plus HEIF or whatever, there's a separate file that gets written. Now, that HEIF or that JPEG is made by the camera. And so that's kind of important because the RAW, when you open the RAW in any RAW decoder, that RAW will not look the same as the camera-generated JPEG. And that's because RAW decoders have a style. Each company has a look that they want their RAWs to look like. And each camera manufacturer, they want their photos to look a certain way. So like Nikon's might be more, they may be more vivid, or they may punch up the reds, and then Sony has their own style. And that's what the camera builds. The camera generates a JPEG that's the aesthetic of the company that makes that camera. And then the RAW is decoded by everybody differently. So Adobe RAWs look different from Apple RAWs, look different from Capture One RAWs, because that's the aesthetic of the company that made that RAW decoder. So the RAW and the JPEG don't match in general.
Gotcha.
So you'll sometimes maybe see a shift in the color between the RAW and the JPEG. And so RAW plus JPEG will also generally not match. For that same reason, right? Because they're decoded through different pieces of software. So when you shoot RAW plus JPEG or RAW plus HEIF, what you're getting is two files, but when you put them into an app like Photos, it treats it as a single asset, a single item, where you can work with them somewhat independently, but they kind of go together as a unit. And depending on where you are, like on the Mac, you can edit the JPEG or the RAW in Mac Photos, but on iOS you can't. You can only edit the JPEG. Unless you're using raw power. Using raw power, then you can edit the RAW, right? So, so that's kind of what's going on there. So there's two separate files that are linked together, and then they kind of go together. They kind of join at the hip. That's essentially what's happening there.
Do share sheets favor the JPEG or HEIF? If I don't know, like if Apple Photos, if I have that both of those images there, you don't get a pick. I don't think.
No, you don't pick. And so that's sort of policy. It's up to the app to decide what it wants to do. Generally speaking, if you've edited the photo, you're going to get the JPEG. You're going to get an edited JPEG.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're doing raw plus JPEG, there's a control in Photos that kind of says, do you want me to send all of the data or just some of the data? And so if you set that flag, and that's a relatively new feature, then it will send both the raw and the JPEG. Otherwise, it'll just send one of them. So raw plus JPEG is super powerful, but there's a lot of complexity and a lot of gotchas that kind of come up with it. So if you're using that, you kind of really need to be aware of what's really going on there, because there's so many. Well, in this case, it's raw plus JPEG. In that case, that's what happens a lot.
Gotcha. Something I'm curious about is stacking for editing. So HDR stacking and focus stacking. Is this something you've looked into? There's only one app I know on iPad that can do this. I know it's a bit more complex, but I used it the other week to save a very old iPhone photo. We had 2 photos taken of me in front of a waterfall. One was exposed for the waterfall behind me. One was of me, and it saved this photo where I took this years ago. It's like, I might be able to do something with this one day, and it did. So I'm not sure if this is something that it makes sense for an app like Raw Power.
It's something people have asked for, and it's definitely interesting. I haven't done anything with HDR and stacking, in part because that's a very specialized tool, and there are very specialized tools for it.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to focus more on the, kind of the 95% case of editing images. I think that there's a lot of special purpose image processing that's necessary. So I never say never, but it's not something that the application does right now. It's not on the immediate horizon either.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's something I know, like the big fancy cameras, you can take a bunch of photos and that's kind of the purpose of it. So,
right.
But I don't know how often that's ever used. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for some people it's used more than us. If you're an astrophotographer, then you're going to stack a lot. But there is very, very good software that's designed for that market.
Exactly.
And that's what you're going to use to get the right results.
Yeah.
So,
and people may even start there, and they have that now workable file they can edit in their favorite app of choice after that. Depending.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think from my standpoint, if I can't do something, the best or, nearly the best, I'd rather let somebody else do that and recommend people use that tool than try to just check a box. For
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the user interface of Raw Power, can you kind of walk me through kind of your mindset in designing this app that it scales really nicely from the iPad all the way down to the iPhone? You have a Mac version as well, of course. And then one really nice thing I like about the UI is you have all these different areas of editing capabilities in a photo, and it'll kind of mark it in a different color when you've done something there. So you can know I've touched this area of the app. I can kind of look back at this or address a different part of the photo.
So the UI is the interesting thing about the UI, especially on iOS, is I didn't want to make an interface that was designed to be so simplistic that it was, it's just a phone. What can you do on a phone?
Yeah,
you can do anything on a phone.
Yeah,
and so it's very difficult to get this level of sophistication in a iPhone SE sized thing, but people do. And one thing that's interesting, when it's possible to kind of tell, okay, people are using the iPad or the iPhone or whatever. And when the iPhone 10 came out, that quickly became the number one device for raw power, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And so it's the app's got to be able to provide a really good experience. If you're holding it in portrait or you rotate the phone, all the features have to be there. So there's a bunch of things specific in the app. So for example, what you can do is there's about 15 different sets of adjustments, right? So things like crop or, sharpening or curves or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can turn them on and off individually, but you can also decide the order that you want them to appear, and you can also remove them from the list. So
Yeah.
for a smaller screen, you can shrink down the number you're looking at. So it's maximizing your screen real estate.
Right. You may not be someone that uses curves, and you may not want to see
Right.
that.
You never see it. And also on iOS, whenever you basically open an adjustment to look at it, all the other ones close.
Yeah.
So that way you're always focused on the one you're working on, but it's not a modal experience. You just go tap on the next one and it expands, the other ones shrink, right? So the whole thing kind of adapts to a smaller screen by doing this sort of management of which adjustments are more important to you, which ones do you want to see or not see. If you decide, oh, for this image I want curves, then the next time you go back to the image, curves appears. But the next image, well, that's not one of your main ones, so it hides itself, right?
Yeah.
So you get the best of both by doing that. And in portrait orientation, the same thing. You've got this list of all these adjustments, but you can control which ones you see and what order that you see them in. So that's very much designed to make the app easy to work with.
Yeah. Something kind of interesting along that lines. I don't know if this would make sense at all to implement, but different controls. I'd love one for I'm shooting a landscape versus people, and have different controls show like almost templating the controls in a way. I don't know if that even would make sense to try to even design.
Are you talking sort of by subject matter?
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible. I think I'd have to think about that. It's an interesting.
It might
idea.
be a bit complicating. I don't know how you'd explain, because you have templates already as far as like LUTs and stuff that you can import and work with.
Right. I mean, a configurable interface I think is generally a valuable thing. It's just a balance of making sure you don't confuse people and they wonder that the application kind of figured out, oh, these are portrait images. I should show you these controls and these.
Right.
And then at some point it's like, where
you'd
do
almost
my
need
controls go?
in the reordering and configuring, you'd have to have like, I don't know, different, like a drop down of which set you want.
Interesting idea.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another thing that's special about the app in terms of dealing with these smaller screens, or the fact that the screens change so much in aspect ratio, right? Wide to narrow. So the histogram, of course, is a pretty fundamental tool when editing images. But when you're holding like an iPhone, for example, or your portrait on an iPad, there's not room to put that anywhere.
Right.
So the histogram basically appears as a separate little floating guy that you can drag around and get it out of the way. But there's another neat feature, which is you can tell it to automatically appear and disappear. So one setting is you can tell it to automatically appear only when you're moving a slider. So you'll look at the picture and you move the slider and the histogram appears automatically. And as soon as you let go, it vanishes. Right?
Yeah.
And there's also the inverse. You can say, show me the histogram, but when I grab a slider, hide it, because you want to see the whole picture. Right?
Yeah.
So it lets you have the histogram available to you, but only exactly when you want it. And that's important on a small screen where every single, square inch matters.
Very much, yeah. I mentioned LUTs a second ago. Can you speak a bit more on LUTs and its uses within raw power? And
sure,
yeah.
So LUTs in the app, there are so a LUT, of course, a lookup table is basically a way to very quickly change the appearance of image to have a certain style, like the way they put them in movies. Say, oh, this movie has a very it's got a tint to it. It's in a desert and it's got this sort of yellowish brownish look to it. And if you kind of don't even notice it sometimes, but it's a very important part of the mood. And so what's nice about LUTs is they kind of incorporate a lot of stuff that a preset does, but in a way that is easier to use and share. So raw power comes with a whole bunch of LUTs. So there's some ones that are meant to be creative, like a film, right? So it gives you a mood, whether it's a nighttime mood or a whatever desert or whatever. And then there are bunches of ones that are actually meant to simulate the Fujifilm film simulations.
Yeah.
So those were done. So I worked with a bunch of customers who shoot Fuji, and they and I worked together to tune these simulations to look very close to what the Fuji ones are, because the Fuji simulations are designed for their cameras and their system, whereas my engine is different, so they have to be different. And then I worked with another company called Lutify, and they provided LUTs as well. So all of these things let you very quickly generate a really cool look.
Yeah.
You can also, there's an intensity slider that lets you dial it back. So you can get a look and then kind of tone it down a little bit. And you can import your own. So you can bring in your LUTs from anywhere, and you can get them online for free. I mean, there's thousands of these things available free, and they're all sorted by the app. You can import them and use them right away. So you can get those looks really quickly with these LUTs, and it's fast, and there's a lot of flexibility with it.
That's really cool. And I'd imagine when like DaVinci Resolve comes to iPad, I'm sure those will support LUTs, and you could have the same look for the video you're editing and the photo you're working with in raw power.
Right. Exactly.
So, I'm curious a bit on RAW files versus DNGs, which appear to be like a stripped down version of RAW. Is that the best way of describing it?
No, so DNG is an open RAW format. So I mentioned earlier how camera companies, they don't document their RAW formats. Most of them are variants of TIFFs, but even then, they don't meet the TIFF spec in a lot of cases, and it's kind of the same concept, but not the same thing. And so DNG is a documented RAW format. So when someone creates a DNG, you can feel pretty good, like 98% good, that's going to be work everywhere.
Yeah.
Because Adobe has actually documented this is what these fields mean, and this is where they are. There's no hiding of well, there is hiding, but there's less hiding, of information in there. So there's a manufacturer RAW and there's a DNG, and you can take a RAW from any company pretty much and make a DNG out of it with Adobe's DNG converter. And so what some people do that all the time. But I don't think that's actually necessarily the best thing to do. It's a preference. There are pros and cons to doing that. So when you are using the manufacturer's RAW, then all of that data is going to be there, and a company like Apple, which has characterized and analyzed those images, will have a very custom way of representing that image. That's the best possible image. And then when it's converted to DNG, they will read all that similar kind of data, but the look may be a little bit different. So it's not 100% the same if you use a RAW versus a DNG. And I'm just talking about Apple's decoder.
Yeah.
Different decoders will do different things. So it's a great way to get support for a camera that is not supported for some reason.
Right.
So that's a big plus. And there's two ways of making two main ways of making a DNG. One is to just convert it. And so the Canon file becomes the DNG. You can also make a DNG and store the original RAW inside the DNG.
Okay. Yeah.
Which makes a very big file. But what it lets you do is, let's say that you're saying, well, Apple or somebody will support this format in a month, but I want to get started now.
Yeah.
You make a DNG, you store the RAW in there. You don't need the original RAW anymore. And then when the company you work with supports that RAW, you can extract the original RAW back out.
Yeah.
So DNGs can contain proprietary RAWs inside of them and pull them out again. So you can do that as well. So there's some flexibility there.
That's really cool.
And then there's a third thing called linearized DNG, which is yet a different thing. And that's ProRAW. So,
ProRAW is a version of DNG. Interesting. Okay.
ProRAW is an interesting version of DNG. So iPhones, when RAW first came to iPhones for the camera, they were stored as DNG. So Apple did not make their own proprietary format. Thank God. What they did was they used DNG, and that was a great decision. Now, iPhone RAWs have their pros and cons in terms of how they look, and they're not great in low light. Pro RAW is this newer thing, which is again still a DNG, but most of the RAW processing has actually already been done.
Yeah.
So it's no longer really, strictly speaking, what I would call a RAW.
Okay.
It's not. It's most of that processing has already happened. So it's done all of the work to convert from a Bayer pattern RAW file. It's now RGB. So ProRAW is RGB. It's not a Bayer pattern file. It's been processed.
Yeah, for most people that haven't worked with RAWs, if you shoot in RAW, it's probably a bit underexposed, and it's not very... Like, when you shoot in ProRAW, it kind of looks pretty similar to the HeFude shoot, where it looks very... It looks like it's ready to go, or it could be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it uses Apple's all that clever computational photography stuff to make it look really nice. And there is still the ability to do some work. So you have the ability to do, white balance. There's some control over tone mapping, but some of the raw things that you're used to doing are no longer possible because they've done that work already. They've processed the image already.
Yeah.
The plus of that is the image, as you said, it looks a lot better generally out of the gate. But if Apple's made some decisions on, some sharpening or noise reduction, you can't undo a lot of that. That's kind of already happened.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not as raw as you might think. You get a lot of the editing benefits of a raw, but it's not all of them.
Not all of them. And apps like Halide, I think, can shoot in the old version of RAW.
Either one.
Yeah, either one, yeah.
Right. And I should mention, Halide and RAW Power do integrate. So you can go from Halide and you can open up RAW Power and you can edit the image you shot in Halide directly.
Oh, very cool.
And in RAW Power, you can hit a button and go to open Halide. So the two apps actually do talk to each other.
Oh, that's very cool. As far as shortcuts, I'm curious, and I guess DNGs in general, have you considered like a way of using RAW Power within shortcuts to, after you do your big dump of unsupported cameras, to use RAW Power to kind of make them happier in the Photos app?
Yeah, I have thought about that. It's not something in the app currently, but I think that's really cool. There's a lot of interesting workflows that can be enabled. So yeah, one possibility is, can I make these things work better in the Photos app? Or, is there something else we can do? I want to hit a button that does a thing that I do all the time with it, whatever it is. I make 16:9 crops that are going to show up on
the
TV.
Yeah, you copy all the adjustments
like
that you do for...
Right. Yeah, I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think that'd be pretty cool.
Cool, yeah. And then as far as batch processing, when you're actually in RAW Power, what kind of stuff can you batch process? To say you have a photo shoot and you want to do a bunch of stuff to...
Sure. That's actually one of the strengths of the app, is this actual ability to do batch processing. So you can pick, a range of photos in the grid, just, whatever number of them, all of them if you want. And then there's a bunch of things you can do. So you can auto-enhance them. So RAW Power has an auto-enhance feature, and it will go and individually analyze each picture one at a time, and enhance each one. So that's fixing things like the white balance, or, adjusting the... making, if it's too dark, it makes it brighter. If it's too bright, it makes it more even. You can batch apply a preset. So if you've got presets that you have, that the app comes with a whole bunch, but if you want to add your own preset, you can just batch apply a preset. You can batch export. So the export has a lot of things. You can export is very rich in the app. You can control. I want to write out to JPEGs or PNGs or TIFFs or whatever. You can control the bit depth, the color profile, add a watermark. I mean, there's a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you don't do that one at a time, so you can batch export that. You can, revert over to original if you've got a whole bunch of edits. You just want to clean them up. So there's a whole lot of things you can do there all at once, so that it's really easy to make progress. In fact, one of the things you can do is, let's say you've edited an image and you've got a whole bunch that are similar, right? You've edited one and you like that one. with batch processing, you can say, you know what, that last image I did, just paste on all of these.
Yeah.
Right. So it automatically remembers the last one you did. You don't have to do anything. It just remembers it and just goes through and just stamps it onto all the ones that are going forward that you pick. So yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things, because I'll have a photo session and it's all in the similar lighting and subjects, and this edit would look great everywhere, and doing that batch process is just great.
Yes, it's called paste last edit. You just say, here you go, paste, and that's it. Yeah.
Something I'm curious about, I don't know if you have an XDR iPad Pro yet, the reference mode on the new iPads, when that is appropriate versus what your thoughts are on True Tone. I know, like Apple in the settings, they use reference mode when you're in a color-friendly environment where it's not going to make you see different things. Any thoughts on that stuff?
Yeah, that's tricky. True Tone is meant to balance, for different times of the day or different lighting situations to look more natural or be kinder to your eyes.
Yeah.
All those kind of things. When you're editing an image, you obviously want a more neutral situation, because when someone's going to see that image you're editing is not the same time you're actually editing it, right?
Yeah.
So you want to have as neutral, or at least as well defined a screen as you can. That's why people calibrate their monitors and stuff. They want to have everything known so that when they're editing it, there's no surprises, right?
Yeah, I've sometimes caught myself. It's like, oh, night shift is on. Turn that off.
Exactly. Yeah, because things will be yellow, right?
Yes.
Things get more yellow, and then you come back and going, "What was I thinking?"
Yeah.
The screen changed on you, and so that's the thing that happens. So yeah, it's important to be careful, and that's why also people will adjust the background of the image they're editing, because if it's too bright or too dark, then that can cause you to perceive color and contrast differently than if it's more neutral background.
Yeah.
So all those things factor in.
Yeah, very much so. And as far as the editing tools, there are certain tools within Raw Power that are just for raw photos. And one thing I'm curious about is there's Sharpen within Raw, and then there's Sharpen for just everything. And you can actually do both. Can you kind of walk me through that sure. Ability to sharpen twice over?
Yeah, and that is a confusing part. I acknowledge that, and it's kind of it's there to provide people with different tools that will have different effects. So each sharpener works a little differently, and it actually works at different points in the pipeline. So Raw Power, despite its name, can edit basically any image. You can add it, JPEGs and HEIFs and PNGs and TIFFs and RAWs, and all the tools are the same except the RAW specific tools. And so one of them is like what you said, which is called RAW Sharpen. There's another one called Boost, which is critical for doing highlight recovery. So
yeah.
Raw Power is extraordinary highlight recovery because it hooks directly into Apple's RAW decoder. And so it is able to manipulate the decode in a way that other apps just don't do. And so all those things that are in this thing called raw processing are direct hooks into Apple's decoder. So raw sharpen and raw contrast are actual ways of interacting with the raw at its earliest stage. So before it's been turned into something looking nice. So it's still working with that bare or mosaic data. And so some apps have something called capture sharpening, which is very early stage. Raw sharpen is basically capture sharpening.
Okay.
And it's camera dependent. So each camera is a little different, and the raw sharpener works differently on different cameras. So in some it's a more aggressive sharpener, and others it's a less aggressive sharpener. It has to do with the camera itself and the sensor. Then there's a general sharpener, which works differently. It's just a different kind of thing that works on all images. And then there's something like this. There's clarity. Clarity is a type of sharpener. So there's different sharpeners. They have different feels to them. And so it's kind of like, well, you've got these different similar tools, and it's preference or your workflow that decides which one to use.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then as far as the editing tools in general, anything you'd like to speak about as to kind of things that you're most proud of, how you've implemented certain edits within photos? Or
Sure. So there's a few. So one of them is for portrait images, the portrait mode. There's a special adjustment called depth effect, and what that lets you do is work with the depth information that the camera has. And so what you can do is you can actually manipulate. So what the portrait mode does is it captures distance.
yeah.
And then what raw power has the ability to work on the highlights and the shadows of the foreground and the background independently. But not only can you do that, you can also kind of redefine what's foreground and what's background. So if you want to kind of add a little bit more depth, for example, than was provided, you can actually stretch the background essentially. And so that gives you a lot of ability to kind of really play with the what's going on in the two parts of that image. There's also a purple fringe corrector, and so I'm very proud of that one because that's, as far as I know, that's the best one anywhere. It is able to correct fringing that nobody else can correct. I have a customer who I mentioned that I was working on this fringe thing, and he said, "Have I got an image for you?" And it is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's just, the fringe is just epic. It's just huge amounts all over the place, and it actually made me throw away my fringe and write it from scratch all over again. And I showed it to him, and he said, "I have never ever seen anybody fix that image." And so that one is the best.
So that terminology, fringing, is that like purple artifact I see on some iPhone shots?
Yeah, so it generally appears in high contrast areas. So an example is if you point your phone, like we're entering winter, so you're going to have a lot of trees without leaves. And so if you shoot like a whitish sky, right, because it's all cloudy, and you shoot the tree branches and then the sky, then that dark to white transition you'll often get purple edges around those high contrast areas. That's fringing. And so it can happen in those cases, in other high contrast, kind of dark to light. And so and basic fringing is not too hard to correct, but extreme fringing is very hard to correct without causing damage or distortion to the image, because you're trying to correct this, you can make it look weird.
Right.
And so this algorithm was tuned for the worst of the worst of purple fringe. So,
and is this something you apply and it just looks at the entire image, or are you kind of tapping over the areas that need work?
No, it finds it for you.
It finds it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's purple and green fringing. There's two kinds, but they work the same way. It's the same underlying technique. The vignette is nice because most vignettes will let you put a vignette around the center, but the raw power one lets you pick the center. So if you've got a person who's slightly offset, you don't want that to be affected. You can just put that point anywhere you want to. And actually, when you do that, it temporarily darkens the vignette, so it's very clear what it's going to do. When you let go, it removes the extreme effect, so you can really see what's going to happen. So the vignette that you can control the center of, that's cool. And curves is unique. So curves isn't a very advanced tool, and but one of the things that people who really know curves, if you kind of read the web pages on Photoshop and curves, they'll often tell you, if you really want to work with a curve, you need to do these 9 steps.
Yeah.
And so one of them is you need to convert it to LAB, and then you need to do this, you need to do that, and make a layer. Well, what they're trying to say is, if you work with a curve, a lot of the times if you work with a curve, it's going to cause a tint. It tints your image, and that's because that curves generally work in that things are gamma corrected, and they work on the grays, but not in a way that's necessarily what you want. it's just kind of historical.
Yeah.
And so the expert Photoshop people say, no, you want to work in luminance, not grace. And it's an expert thing, but it's
Yeah,
very
I sometimes
important.
get confused if I should start with curves or do the other adjustments because you can do color adjustments
Right.
elsewhere with just sliders and
Both are very legitimate. But if you want kind of the best output, curves is your way to go, and then use luminance.
yeah,
Because if you use luminance, that's that 9-step thing in Photoshop. Well, there's just a button in raw power that does that for you.
nice. Yeah.
And you can also run in different modes that give you all the power of advanced like Photoshop curves, but with just a button press here, a button press there.
Nice.
So bring that power and make it easy.
Yeah. How do you treat live photos? Is that not something you treat any different from standard photos as far as the editing?
Yeah, right now live photos are treated just as photos.
Okay.
They're not. Yeah, they don't work on the video. It's something I'd like to improve in the future.
Yeah, cool. As far as the new cameras, the iPhone 14 Pro, 48 megapixels versus the old 12 meg. Any thoughts on just these new photos we're able to capture on iPhones?
That's a lot of pixels.
It is.
Yeah, I have one right here, and so yeah, it's interesting. What I really like is that there's these two different kind of modes. There's the 48 megapixel mode, which is, I think it works best in bright light because the sites they're noticeably smaller.
Yeah.
But I really like that you can get a much better 12 megapixel image from the 48.
Yeah.
Through binning, right? So they said, well, let's take 4 of these, make one really good one out of it. So you get very nice 12 megapixel shots. And then if you really need that maximum resolution for, cropping or whatever, and you have enough light, man, yeah, go for that 48. So having those options is terrific.
Yeah. And they take advantage of that. And the 2X, I find just stunning how well that works. I know it's just
the 2X
crop,
is good,
but
yeah. And again, in bright light, the 3X is really nice to have available to you, even, but all those lens choices combined with the flexibility of the resolution is really fantastic.
Yeah. So something I noticed is that your app actually heavily uses the system settings. Like if you go to the settings app on your iPhone, raw power, there's a bunch of stuff in there. What was, I guess, the decision first off to use that versus settings within the app itself? And then as far as the settings, anything of note that people should kind of look at and maybe tweak?
Yeah. So, most apps I'd say now have their own settings inside the app. And I can see that. I understand why that is. There are a lot of pluses, I think, to integrating with the settings app. And one of the things that is important about raw power is it tries to be a poster child for a lot of stuff, right? It says, okay, I'm going to integrate the best I possibly can into this platform, and I'm going to do things that are the way that Apple has designed things to be. And so putting the settings in the settings app is, what you should do. And
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I don't often see as well done here, is it?
Right. And there is a menu item. You pick it in the app and it takes you right to settings to the page, right? So it's not like, I've got to go dig through settings and look for it. There's a quick jump to it, but it's that integration. So I'd say that, most of the settings, the other things, I try not to make settings something that everybody should go to. I think if you don't know you should have a good policy, right? And then the setting should be for, boy, that's a really unusual way of working with this app.
Okay, the outliers should go there. Yeah,
right. So if you look at them, they're very specific. How do you want to special things about auto enhance, or there's things like I mentioned the background of the viewer. How neutral do you want it to be? So it defaults it to something smart, which is neutral gray, 18% neutral gray. But you can make it darker, bright, based on how you see fit.
Yeah.
So there are a number of settings. Most of them, I think, most people aren't going to need, but they're there.
Yeah.
They're there, and it's worth exploring them to say, oh yeah, no, I didn't know that. Sometimes what's good about settings is they tell you about features you didn't know were in the app.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I didn't know I could control this feature. It's like, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Okay, so go for it. It's easier to show that as text than it is to try to put it in the UI somewhere, some weird place.
So we talked earlier about each camera has its own kind of unique file format. Lens correction, it feels similar. Like as far is that right? Like as far as lens correction, are all 30 millimeter lenses like that are f1.4 the same, or does each manufacturer have a different lens correction for that kind of specifications, or how's that all work?
Yeah, they're all different.
Okay,
that's the short answer. Nothing's the same.
Yeah.
So because they're every lens is designed to meet some goal, right?
Yeah.
It could be a cost goal, right? It's like this needs to be an inexpensive lens. This has to be can be as expensive as we want. So okay, it's going to be softer on the edges. Oh no, it cannot have any softness. It must be tack sharp around. Well, that costs more. So every lens design, they're trading off different different things. So so some cameras will store lens correction information into the file. And when that happens, then Apple's decoder generally is able to read that information and automatically correct the lens. So that's great. Now, Micro Four Third cameras, Sony cameras, some of the Leica cameras, a lot of them have that in there. So generally, the mirrorless cameras. So there's also ones from Canon and Nikon that are mirrorless. So generally, mirrorless cameras store that information.
Yeah.
The sort of the older or the more high end cameras don't usually store that information. Again, there's no absolutes here, so they don't, and then that generally requires some kind of calibration, and then older lenses sometimes don't have that information available to them. It's a real hodgepodge. There's nothing simple there. But yeah, every lens is different, and then it's not just the lens. It's the lens, it's the focal length, it's the size of the sensor matters. All of these things matter.
Right.
So all of that has to all get kind of, mushed together to generate an actual correction.
So is that something you're going through lens by lens, finding the most popular lenses and kind of adding that as an autocorrect?
No. So there's two ways the lens correction works. One is leveraging Apple stuff. Again, that's, one of my things is it's just me. So it's like, okay, how can I leverage other people's really good work? That's why I use iCloud Photos. It's like, wow, there's a whole bunch of great people who are working on Cloud Sync. I'll let them do that. Same thing with the lens correction. Okay, Apple's got this thing really good. Let's leverage that. But then there is lens correction, manual correction built into raw power, and it's kind of a hybrid lens correction. I say manual, but it's a smart lens correction. It learns, and the way that works is, when you correct a lens, then it keeps track of those characteristics. What's the camera? What's the focal length? What's the lens? What's these different various pieces of metadata, and then it starts building a profile. So if you start to correct a few images, it starts to figure out, okay, this is how this lens ought to be corrected.
Yeah,
and then as soon as you at some point when you bring in an image, boom, it's automatically corrected for you. You don't have to do anything. So it'll automatically correct the lens using what you have taught it so far. And so I made a video and I provide a file you can print out, take a picture of it, use that in the app, and then you can adjust this. They're just a few simple sliders, get it looking right, and now you've taught the app about that lens. You can take a few more pictures of different focal lengths or whatever, and now you have taught it how to correct your lens for you.
Very cool.
Yeah. So
nice. As far as the iPad, any specific platform features of the iPad, like the pencil, and I'm not sure if you've looked into Hover for this new iPad and what can be done there.
So yeah, the app does support the pencil, but mostly as a pointing device. It doesn't do anything too special with it. I am looking at Hover. I think that Hover is very interesting. There are some kind of obvious things that you could do with Hover that are kind of like, oh, that's kind of like how a mouse might do things, that kind of thing. But then there's like, no, let's think about it a little differently. What is someone going to do when they've got the pencil kind of near it? Maybe it's a show original, or maybe it's a previewing of something, or
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different things to try. I think it's an interesting area for experimentation.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked mainly about editing, but the photo library is something you kind of build upon with star ratings, flagging, and you can filter. How's that data kind of transpose into the Photos app? Is this data just used within raw power? Kind of a little bit on the photo management aspect of.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is one of the unique features of the application, is how it works with ratings and flagging. And so, as we know, the photo app on Mac and on iOS does not have ratings or flags, which is a pretty basic feature, but unfortunately still not there. I implemented ratings in both on the Mac and the iOS. But yeah, the question is, well, wait a minute. If it's only available in raw power, how useful is that really? And it's like, well, it's a little useful, but it's not as useful as it could be. And also, well, how is that data going to work with iCloud? Well, that's a problem too.
Yeah, where's the storage?
So where's it stored? So the way it works is it actually makes some albums in your photo library. And there's one for each star rating.
Okay.
There's a 1 star, 2 star, a reject, and a flag. And so all of those are present in your photo library as albums. And so when you rate things, it's basically putting that picture in the right album. It can only be in one, right? So if you have 1 star, it's in the 1 star album. If you make it 2 stars, take another 1 star, put it in the 2 star. So it's basically managing the putting the images into those albums. And so that provides some really cool benefits. One is it syncs over iCloud, right? So that since albums sync, boy, you go to your other machine and all the ratings are there. So when you go into raw power on your other device, Mac or iPhone or whatever, all the ratings are there. You see the stars and you can change them and everything works. But also, because they're albums, that means that you can take advantage of that ratings in Photos or in any other app. So if you say, I'm going to make these 5-star images, you can go to any app that can read the photo library. And that means even just the most basic ones that have photo pickers. And you can find that 5-star album, and they're your 5-star images. So it integrates really well with the system to have star ratings and flags work through this album system.
And what about filtering? What can you do there?
Yeah, you can filter by things like date, rating, flag, raw plus JPEG. There's different characteristics. There's some limitations to filtering. Partly, like what you can't do today is you can't say things like, "Oh, show me all the images shot with this particular, Sony camera." Right? Okay. The Sony uses ZV-10 or which one it is. So it's like, okay. And partly that's because the way that the photo library works, it doesn't provide that information inexpensively.
Okay. Yeah, it's in the metadata, but that's
that's
too
not
intensive.
Available.
Yeah, not available. I'd also imagine like Apple has this thing of like searching for dog and finding all the dogs. That's probably not available to you quite yet as a developer.
Sadly, no.
Yeah.
So Apple does not provide access to the keywords, to the title, the caption, any of that stuff. It's all private to them. And so with things like metadata, that stuff is not available without getting a hold of the original file, opening it and reading it. And that's fine unless you've got an iCloud library.
Yeah.
Got an iCloud library. Well, I don't think people want me to download their entire library just to see if it's shot with this camera.
Definitely not.
So without the ability to read that metadata efficiently, there's not much point in having that kind of feature.
Yeah.
Which is why it's not there. So the things that the app can do efficiently, it provides. And without having to download your images.
And imagine that's probably a struggle as far as if you wanted to build smart albums, you don't have all the data because you don't want to download everything to make those smart albums with the data.
And Photos does not provide the smart albums to apps as well.
Right.
So if you make a smart album, like smart albums are not even on iOS, but in the Mac you can make smart albums. But those smart albums are not visible to third-party apps at all.
Right.
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
So so we're a little hamstrung with some of the things. I get a lot of emails from people saying, how do I see the keywords? It's like, love to show them to you.
Yeah.
I have asked many times, but so far, no dice.
Yeah. Something would love to see one day is I sometimes take photos at the same kind of time and place with my iPhone, then my Sony camera. You can copy adjustments. I'd love if there was just a simple copy and paste of location.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think I'm going to look into that. I think that the ability to manipulate the location and just a simple copy paste location, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, because I'll use different apps and I'll like search for where I was, but it'd be so nice to just copy and paste from like
right.
The photos literally right next to the other photo, and especially with shared photo library, I'll have my wife's photos right there that are all on iPhone, so it's like I got location data right there.
Absolutely. Yep. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, and then your app is for photos, but it can play back videos. Is that kind of the extent of where you see videos in raw power?
I think the ability to edit them would be useful. It's more complicated to edit video because some of the things you want to do, the time aspect of video matters. But you can play them and you can rate them and flag them and filter for them. So they do work in that way. So you can still do those kind of features like rating. Cool. But in terms of editing, that's not there at this point.
Okay, excellent. And then any hidden kind of touch gestures that are in the app?
A little bit. They're mostly ones I think people are gotten used to, like you press and hold to show original, and you can double tap on a slider to reset it. I don't really like to create a lot of hidden gestures. That's just not. I don't think that we're doing anybody any favors when they do something. It's like, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
So if they're kind of standardized ones, I'm inclined to do those rather than. Did you know that if you use 3 fingers and your toe, then it will do this, right? That I don't
keyboard
think
shortcuts are a bit more discoverable than the touch gestures.
And it definitely does those. So if you have a keyboard, you will see a lot of shortcuts. So you can rate and flag and show original and arrow and jump around and all this kind of stuff. There's a very large number of shortcuts through the keyboard.
Excellent. Yeah. And the addition to the keyboard of the iPad has just been transformational. Like it's great.
Yeah, whenever I don't have my keyboard and the soft keyboard comes up, I'm going like, I don't know, what am I doing?
Yep. And then HSL, what's that short for? Have we touched on this one yet?
No. So HSL, hue, saturation, and luminance.
Yeah.
So it's another advanced control. It's really, really cool. What it lets you do is work on specific ranges of color.
Okay.
So a common example would be the sky or grass, or there's, you've got this, orangey thing or something you want to work on. And so what you can easily do is just say, hey, I want to work in the blues and I want to, pump them up or mute them or make them darker or lighter or whatever. And that's just a matter of you tap on blue and then you just kind of move some colors and it just very, very nicely adjusts just those colors without affecting anything else. And it's lets you both create a mood for things, but also just adjust those pieces you want to really easily without any kind of fancy, let me select this or that or paint or whatever. Just pick that. And you can there's a whole bunch of built-in hues, but you can also, there's a custom one. You can just tap that and then tap anywhere on the image and it will basically blend hues together.
Oh, so very nice.
So it's like, well, it's not really that. It's like a bluish green. It's like, well, okay, tap on the bluish green, and it will then basically work on the blues and the greens together for you, right? You don't have to think about it.
Yeah, because in other apps I've had to I have brown in the grass, so I have a different color selected for that browny grass I'm trying to make green than the other grass. So it's nice to have that merge because
Right. Yeah. So if you've got kind of intermediate, or if you want to work on the browns and the blues separately, you can do that too.
Yeah.
But both are available. So yeah, HSL is really cool. There's also split toning control, so you can work on the highlights separate from the shadows.
Hmm.
So that's actually a really powerful tool as well. So that's neat. So that's there. Those are both relatively new
Yeah.
features.
Yeah. When I discovered the ability to like make the grass more alive and the sky more vibrant, it's like, oh, this is great. Like this
Yeah.
is like it's just instant gratification as far as like you're 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 affecting just the vibrancy and or even like making it less vibrant if you want to.
Mhm.
Yeah. And one fun thing to do is like you can like make it black and white all except for the red on your like dog's collar. She might have like a flower on there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's a those split toning and HSL are both really nice creative tools. So editing doesn't have to just be about making things correct. You can make things creative and interesting too.
Yeah. And then for those that don't live in iCloud Photo Library and maybe have this huge like library on an external hard drive, you support the Files app. Can you kind of speak about the workflow of working within Files versus the Photos app?
Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of ways to use the Files app. So one is, so I had a lot of people who said I don't want to use the Photos app because I don't want to basically consume my entire iCloud storage with all of these photos. So I want to just manage a small set of them. So I said, okay. So the first thing was you can import images into the app from wherever you want to. You can, from another app, you can say, basically give it to raw power and it'll store it not in the photo library, but in its own thing.
Yeah.
And you get all of the same rating and editing, all that kind of stuff is there. You don't get the sync through iCloud, but you get all the other stuff.
And that stuff is stored, is that with it like on the external hard drive itself, or is that part of the on my iPad kind of app specific status set?
All that stuff is stored on device.
Okay.
So there's not something stored on the external drive.
Yep.
And that's something that people have asked for, and it's something I'm looking into. So the external drive, you can also plug in an external drive, and then you can talk directly to that drive, and then you can again edit and rate and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't let you edit on the external drive and then go take that external drive and go plug it into your Mac.
Right.
It's not for that.
Yeah.
It's more to say, look, I've got my iPad. I want to work on my iPad, but I don't want to fill my iPad with space with photos, or I don't want to stick things in iCloud. That's what it's for.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was just thinking it'd be neat if there was some way to do the offloading more seamlessly to do the year month structure within Files, but I guess it's kind of a manual process of just hooking up the SD card and
you mean organizing things into folders automatically?
Yeah.
That's a good feature. The app does not have that.
No,
but,
and I'm just trying to. I mean,
that's
right now it's
valuable.
a very manual thing, or you can use shortcuts to try to work with that. But yeah, when I offload stuff, I just dump it in the Photos app and kind of work with it from there.
Sure.
Yeah. And then there is a Mac version, and you mentioned they do talk if you're using iCloud. Anything else to mention about the Mac version?
So the Mac version, it also supports both the photo library and folders you store in the Finder.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, again, they don't use photos at all, or they use photos. They don't want to use photos for all of these images.
Yeah.
So they've organized their things into folders and on their disk. And so the app happily will show you those folders and have, again, all the same features except for the syncing through iCloud. And so that actually is, probably half the people work that way.
Oh, wow.
It's surprising perhaps, but a lot of people manage their photos. They have their own systems, and they need a nice front end with editing. And so RawPower provides that. And so you can have RawPower on Mac actually has multiple windows, so you could have a window open with your photo library, a window open with your, with a folder on your disk, and switch back and forth really easily. So it's got all the same editing tools. The edits sync through iCloud, and you've got the ability to work with photos or files however you want.
Very cool. Yeah, and I was just thinking on the iPad, since it's the Files app you support, like it would work with things like the Synology Drive app, which it lives in the Files app, so you could be editing photos off your Synology right within.
Kind
Right?
of. Kind of yes, kind of no.
Yeah.
One of the things, because of the way the application stores the information on device, it's using a reference back to the original file, but the link it's using sometimes changes on servers.
Okay.
And so the external storage thing is not designed for file servers right now.
Okay.
Again, it's something I'd like to improve with time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some little funky things that sometimes happen with specifically iOS and file servers
Yeah,
that
I
don't
can
happen,
imagine.
for example, on Mac with file servers. They're actually different. So
Yeah.
the Mac works much better with file servers in that respect than raw power does on iOS.
Gotcha.
So,
Well, anything we haven't covered that you'd like to before we wrap it up?
boy, I think we've covered everything. It's been very very detailed. I will say that the app is actually going to be on sale. So through the month of December, it'll be on sale. So it'll be
Excellent.
20 or 25% off. So it'll be a great time to pick it up.
And it's a one-time purchase app. You just buy it and you can use it, and it's in your arsenal to use whenever you need to edit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No subscription. You can just download it and purchase it right there. And yeah, so I think that's really great to have that. The Mac and the iOS apps are separate purchases, but you buy each one only once, and you can have it on as many devices as you want. So you can, if you buy it for your iPad, the same purchase runs in your iPhone. And if you have your Mac, put it on all your Macs you want to.
Yep. And I've been using it with Stage Manager on the external display. I'm on the 16.2, which is in beta as we speak, and it looks great as it scales up to a nice 27-inch display. So it goes down from iPhone all the way up to bigger displays on iPad, which is great.
Yeah, great. And that was really important, was to use the screen real estate efficiently.
Yeah.
So that you get all that. So yeah, if you have a big screen, it's not like, how come it's so weird looking?
Yeah, absolutely. And then for kind of staying up to date with like new updates and what's going on with the app, any certain places you want to plug?
For future stuff?
Yeah, for future stuff.
Not much right now. Working on something big, but in classic Apple fashion, I can't talk about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Nick. This has just been wonderful. And then as far as just search for Raw Power in the App Store, what's the website URL as well?
The quickest way is just go to rawpower.app.
Excellent.
And that'll jump you to the main website, and that's got all the information there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that's my discussion with Nick. Make sure to grab Raw Power now while it's still on sale. It's an incredible app and something that is invaluable for processing RAWs on the iPad. You can learn more about Raw Power at gentlemencoders.com or search for Raw Power in the App Store. My thanks to Nick for his time recording, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. You can support this podcast over at patreon.com/ApplePros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.